It is easier to see the link between coal-fired power plants and air pollution than it is to see between monocalcium phosphate and the gaping holes we have scooped out of the earth to access this mineral. It is easier to see the connection between gas-guzzling cars and greenhouse gases than between soybean oil and the toxic-grade refineries that produce it. But food comes from somewhere, and more often than not, that somewhere is a factory. Quote, "We say food ingredients are manufactured as if they did not exist before, but the truth is everything comes from something else. All artificial ingredients came from, at some point, some part of the earth," wrote Steve Ellinger, who hurtled into mines and wormed his way into factories to track down the 39 ingredients that make up a Twinkie. Quote, "The extent to which they are manipulated makes them artificial, obscures their source." We fuss about the food miles on a tomato as we stuff ourselves with enriched white flour that is made in steel silos larger than the biggest semi-truck. Everything comes from somewhere, and it turns out that most of the ingredients of our processed foods begin in mines and factories as toxic to humans and the atmosphere as any oil refinery. According to Ellinger, Twinkies are made using 14 of the top 20 chemicals manufactured in the United States, and those chemical factories are powered by petroleum. If fruits and vegetables are soil transformed, then processed foods are petroleum packaged. Our food supply chain consumes nearly a fifth of all fossil fuel used in the United States, the single largest consumer after the automobile industry. For most of us, what we eat generates more greenhouse gases than anything else we do. I buy a bag of Chex Mix, and somewhere down the line, far away and out of sight, a factory is drinking fossil fuel and belching methane so that I may enjoy the luxury of a cheddar flavor experience. To return for a moment to my biggest challenge, to muttering in supermarkets and surprises on ingredient labels. What is process? What is the difference between foods people make and foods that are made? Andrew Wilder's kitchen test seemed to be a good starting point. If I could conceptualize the hypothetical, if I could visualize how a food or drink would be made if my janky, understocked kitchen was actually stocked with a meat grinder or wheat miller or grape fermenter, then it seemed like I could draw a line somewhere in the sand. If I could understand how it is that a food arrives at its point of contact, at the point that it changes from commodity to dinner, and if I could trot as far back in the supply chain as I could reach, I figured I could parse out process. So I began where before I had faltered, where the power of process had began thousands of years ago. I began with chocolate.
Yeah, I just have 3 poems, not too long, but that's enough. Alright, this is called New Backyard. Even weekends had their labor, waking up to father in the yard, twisting faucets, dragging branches across the patio, a sound like someone tearing paper. We slipped on gloves, bagged leaves and laid down floors of sod and covered up the ground. I drew the net through the pool, collecting each scrap dusted with pollen, the crumpled wasps, the June bugs that barnacled the screens each night. I swept pine needles from the patio and ripped weeds from the dirt. Each inch of soil or blade of grass still damp with dew, like the sweat left behind by a dream. In one we find a python by the roses, and he tells me to stab it with a stick. At the ladder's tip, he pruned the mulberry trees for fall until they were abstract. Only when we had to did we speak, while I secretly waited for when my mother called us in for lunch. If it's true that all we know of one another are the promises between us, then all we have of ourselves is what we've made, the crouching you rise from every time to feel your back unclench, the strain that piles up when you aren't looking, like snow overnight, cement to be scraped clean. '50s diner. We were pulling into the gas station for an afternoon nap because we hadn't slept the night before. We were lying with our clothes off in the giant motel bed, drinking rum with orange juice out of jars and watching television. A western where the good guy comes to town, saves a woman from her evil stepdad, rising to the sun. I make things up like this. We were on the 101, crossing the state to make it to your brother's graduation. Your hand in my pants and mouth in my ear. The fields float by, but there's always an abandoned, weathered barn still standing. I keep telling you to stop, but I don't want you to stop. We were caught in the private pool. We were sitting in the red and blue lights at the Applebee's bar. Somebody is whistling from a booth. He's whistling at you. Why can't you make him stop? I'm supposed to be having my own dreams. I went down the escalator, past the baggage claim, out the airport doors, and there you were. I said, you look great, and you said I looked okay. The freeway clogged up, but it didn't matter. He punched a code in on the keypad and the metal gate swung wide. Dark yards, sprinklers spitting out their rounds. You were painting your apartment yellow. Newspapers covered the floor, made my shoes sound heavy. Here I am again, feeling like a thief, like I take something from you each time. When you asked what I wanted, I acted like I didn't have an answer. Here's the window. Here's the ceiling fan like a tape reel eating up our words. Here's my face in the bathroom mirror. All the little scars on my forehead exposed by the fluorescence. It's not a dream anymore. I should have told you sooner. I didn't think I'd have to hold your hair back. But he hasn't stopped whistling, and everyone wants to see what I'm about to say. I'm supposed to do something with my body. So last one. A small canine nearby remembers he's gone. And your parents' golden retriever whips her nose out of somebody's gardenias, ears propped like little tents with wonder. You like to walk her if you're in town, nights when you can see the bedrooms change their shade each second, the televisions in them unable to make up their minds. You pass the tennis courts, go into the park. You can smell the smoke of 17-year-olds. This is where you once got high through a bright green apple, where you watched a friend do morphine. You unclip the leash, and the dark lawn absorbs her. When she emerges, there's a stick between her teeth. You throw it at the trees, listen to her crash through the creek for it. She marches it back, and this goes on for days, until one night a cop car marks you with its beam, asks if you'd scram. Hell, you say, we'll take the long route home, over the railroad littered with seashell needles. This is where you carry her.